Now to have in studio with us presidential hopeful seeking the presidency of this country on the Restore and Build Kenya party ticket.
Yes.
Professor James Ole Kiyiapi is with us. Welcome into the studio.
Thank you, Julie.
You've come from Meru. It's been a busy day where
Yes.
you were campaigning with
We
Winnie.
were in Maua.
In Maua with your running mate, and,
Yes.
and we'll come to that selection in just a moment. But very quickly, let's start with your party, which has national unity, integrity and servant leadership, economic and social empowerment, equal opportunities for all Kenyans, stewardship over national resources. These are things we really like to hear, and democracy as part of its agenda. But let me put this to you, Professor. What is your track record on these issues? You've been in government for a while now. What have you done in terms of protecting the resources of this nation, ensuring democracy and integrity?
Julie, I was a teacher, I was a lecturer, and let's begin there. And I think that I taught for about 15 years, and I can really look at you in the face and say, I taught Kenyan kids. I shared myself, I shared my philosophy, I inspired them. And there are very many there watching me right now and say, that was my teacher, that was my professor. And I've been a PS in government. I ran the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Medical Services, and Ministry of Education. Very quickly, in the Ministry of Environment, we were the ones who cleaned up Nairobi River. I went there when there was no Kenya Forest Service. I was the one who operationalized Kenya Forest Service February 2007, even though the law had been passed 2005. I was the one who guided the Minister Michuki, the late Michuki, to engage in Mount Forest conservation. In fact, had politics not hijacked the Mount Forest issue, we had a clear plan of how to engage the local people and how to save the forest. It is called a win-win situation. So we did that within a very short time. Then I went to Ministry of Medical Services. Well, while I was there, the Mama Lucy Hospital in Kayole, it was just a flooded area. I was the one who started it from the flooded area to what it is today. Kisi level 5. So there were a lot of reform things in each of the ministries I went, and my offices and the public record is there for anybody to check. I was very strict about issues of integrity.
I'm just going to hold you there for a moment,
Yes.
because I remember the first time we had a discussion on integrity, you were in that ministry, and very concerned about what you called the rot in the system.
Yes.
Now, leadership must shift things and change things. Were you able to deal with the rot in the system? And then remember, you went to education, which had a huge scandal emerging,
Yes.
and rot in the system. So what I would really like to know, Prof, to change things, you have to be able to do that wherever you are.
Yes.
What did you do about the rot, the corruption in those two ministries?
What I actually did, for example, in Ministry of Medical Services, when I went there was dual procurement. The ministry was procuring things, KEMSA was procuring things, KEMSA, Kenya Medical Supply Agency, and I was the one who was instrumental in advising Minister Nyang'nyong. I said, Minister, this is confusion. We must stop this. We cannot have the ministry procuring and KEMSA procuring at the same time. So immediately we stopped procurement in the ministry. So we pushed everything to KEMSA so that the role of the ministry was basically oversight. And then I also created accountability structures within the ministry so that it was no longer one officer who was checking things. There was actually a check and balance system within the ministry. That's the same thing I did in education. Everywhere I went, I streamlined, but always before, of course, the results become more visible, I was moved to the next ministry. For example, the issue of education, I was taken there because there was already a mess. Unfortunately, when I arrived there, the report came out, and a lot of Kenyans...
you were accused.
Yes.
You stood accused.
Exactly. And I was actually there to help clean up the place, and I sincerely think that I presided over a system of accounting for those resources, and we submitted a report to Parliament, and basically that report is there with the Treasury.
Did you break the cartels?
Yes, when I was there. In fact, there were
But they came back? Now this is the problem, and perhaps this is what Kenyans don't talk about enough, that there are cartels who are securing contracts in ministries, and this is costing Kenyans a lot of money, and you as a president would need to now deal with these cartels at a whole different level. How would you do that?
And that is why I feel that one of the reasons that makes me an ideal person to become Kenya's CEO is that I understand one area where nobody is talking about, and it is actually the real engine of what is happening in Kenya, the public service, the civil service. Unless we fundamentally restructure and reorganize the civil service in terms of structures and in terms of performance of officers, we can talk up there forever, but things really happen down here. For example, in the civil service, I found some of the most educated, very eloquent people, very skillful people. But they don't have a chance, Julie. Nobody really allows them to be themselves and to contribute to their country because the decision hierarchy is such that it's only one person at the top, Mr. or Madam PS, who must make the decision. So everybody generally in the whole structure is paralyzed. Everybody says, I can't do it until the PS.
And they work 9 to 5, but it's mechanical.
Yes, it's mechanical, and they are shifted from every other week or every other month. So people don't feel they belong. They don't feel they own the system. They don't feel that they can be held to account. And that is one of the major problems that if I had a chance, I will overhaul, because that's where the problem is. Everywhere I went, I tried to reform things, and as soon as I left, even the cartels who stopped coming to the ministry when I was there, in the Ministry of Health, as soon as I left, some of them went and tossed champagne and say, my God, the bad guy has gone.
He's gone. Okay. So interesting that you refer to yourself as the bad guy, because I don't think a lot of Kenyans would see you in that light as a tough guy who can throw cartels out of a ministry.
No, the officers in the ministries know.
They know.
They know that I'm a no-nonsense person. And that's actually why the Kenyan people, even today, if you ask them, was Kiyiapi an effective PS? Everybody will tell you yes, because I got things done. I got results.
Let me ask this question. The polls have you basically nowhere. I mean, it's really a difficult, almost would be an impossible race for you to take the presidency according to the polls.
Julie, I really want us to talk about this.
Yes, let's go into
this. I really want us to talk about this because it's a very serious matter.
For the people who, and let me ask you the question, for the people who would say, Kiyiapi is dreaming. It can't happen. We know who the big players are. We know this is the politics of Kenya. What would you say?
First of all, before we even get there, I do believe very strongly in my heart that the Kenyan people, the 14 million registered voters, will make that decision. And I know that out there, everywhere I went, Kenyans are really listening. If you have noticed, and I don't know whether you are noticing, forget about what you see in these rallies, because those ones are mobilized. It's all about money, how much money you're willing and how much money you have to fill the crowds in the field. But if you really go anywhere, whether it is churches, whether it is anywhere, Kenyans are saying, we really want change. We want good leaders. But let us talk about the polls. According to the recent polls, I got 0.1%. What that means is that if all the 14 million Kenyans have voted today, I would get only 14,000 votes. So even my own constituency, Kilgoris, which is about 100,000 voters, could not even give me more than 14,000. That's what those polls means. Julie, the polls are framed. There are no polls in Kenya. Let me tell you, the way the Kenyan politics and the way the Kenyan population is structured and the way the Kenyan people vote, there is no scientific analysis that has been done or poll that can be conducted in Kenya and accurately capture what Kenyans are going to do. Why? Because right now, as we talk, if one is really lucky, there is none of us, none of the presidential aspirants can now say that they have almost 30%. The best is probably at around 25%.
Let me ask you this. When you say the polls are framed,
yes,
be specific for us.
They are framed in this way. Number one, there are those candidates that are not wanted. The so-called non-starters, the Kiyiapis, the Marthas, the Peters, remove them. Number two, tell the public that this race is only two horses. Two horses, these are the two giants. So that people will start, then they go and now take the propaganda out there to say that don't waste your vote. This one is going nowhere. Because you have already been told this is only about two people. Let me ask you a question. Just a couple of months ago, about 2 months ago, the highest person was about 30%. How is it that the next poll jumps you from 30% to 51%? No science, no statistics ever allows you to do that.
And this from an academic. This is from an
Yes.
academic.
And I want to ask any professor who is listening to me, any expert out there, to come and sit with me, and I would like to come to your studio and let them show me that there is a way you can jump from 30%, one poll you are 30%, and immediately, unless there was something fundamentally radical that has happened. And there is nothing that has happened.
Well, a good indication, especially at this point, would be how many people are running for the nomination
Exactly.
on your party's ticket. What's going on in RBK? We've got the nominations happening. It's a critical time for Kenya. What's happening in RBK?
Well, I think, first of all, you can't also use like party affiliation as a measure. Why? Because, again, it tends to be driven by money. It tends to be driven by perception that if I go there, I will get funding and I will go there. Okay, what happened is that a lot of people went to the so-called big parties. Right now they're swinging back because they are realizing some of them will not get. So there was no real consideration. It wasn't based on values. It wasn't based on ideology. It was simply based on what you think is the likely chance. And you're going to see a big shift this week, people moving from one party to another. Let me again emphasize this. This election is the most critical election in the history of Kenya. Kenya is ready for takeoff. It's like a plane on the runway going. We have laid the foundations. But unfortunately, every time we go close to election, Kenyans create, a few politicians create euphoria, use money to kind of...
Euphoria or fear?
Both.
Fear.
Actually,
Yes.
both. Actually, both, Julie. Euphoria and fear. And in the process, citizens get confused. And also, in a situation where we didn't do enough civic education, then we have a real challenge. Because people basically are looking at the crowds and they're saying, even right now, which one? How do you decide which one is bigger? Because everybody who has money can fill a field.
I'm going to allow you to give Kenyans a message at the end of this interview. But before that, let's talk about Winnie for a moment. Now, Winnie Kaburu Kinyua, who you selected, also is an academic, but has a bit of a track record. But I want to challenge you on this one, Prof. There are people who feel that academics are not the best doers. And we've seen that south of the continent with perhaps Thabo Mbeki, who people say had the most brilliant brains, but execution and connecting with the public was a problem. You are two academics.
Let me start with me.
Yes, please.
I have been in government. I have been a permanent secretary. There's something you can fall back to. And there are people who know, including the public, the professor was here and he moved things. In the Ministry of Education, in 1.5 years, I brought reforms that were more than were achieved in the last 10 years. For example, it was the first ministry, and I would like another one, that aligned the education sector to the new constitution. The laws that Minister Mutula Kiloso just went there were informed by a process that I started when I was there. So I was connecting. I was going to schools. When I was a PS medical, I was going to hospitals. I was touching people, and people know that. Winnie is not an academician. He has never taught in the university. What is called academic is that she has a degree. She has a master's degree. And Julie, there's so many Kenyans who have master's degrees who are very simple, humble Kenyans who are working hard. She has a master's degree, but she is a businesswoman. And she has a chain of investments in Kenya and hotels, real things that create wealth for this country. She has a passion for people. She's a woman of substance. I would like you to call her to come here one of these days. Listen, there are 4 things that move society, or they move any country. Number 1 is politics, given by the people. Number 2 is academia, because that's where ideas come from. Number 3 is public service, because that's the engine, that's the driver. And number 4, private investment, because that's how wealth is created. Winnie and I put 3 of those on the table, and we are asking Kenyans to give us the politics, to elect us into office, because we shall be as practical as it gets. Yes, if you want us to go high, we can go as high as it gets, but if you want us to go low, we go as low as it gets. Just look at where we were today. We were just in a bus stand talking to people.
I'm going to stop
And
you.
that's how my campaign has been.
I'm going to stop you there because time is up, but we need a message for the public. As you do that, perhaps you'd start, we're asking people what their thoughts on the performance of this Parliament has been. And, you know, you've commented on what happened this past week with the sneaking through of a whole load of a huge package for these MPs. So perhaps you'd give us a quick comment on that, and then please look at the camera and tell Kenyans what your message would be for the country as we prepare for this election.
It was outrageous, and I'm very, very happy that His Excellency the President rejected it. I mean, it made a lot of people angry. And I have complained before, in my campaigns and even before, and said our MPs were serving themselves. They were not serving the public that put them there. And usually, Kenyans are looking for leaders who will go and serve them. They are not looking for leaders who are going to boast them and control them and use public resources that are already meager to enrich themselves so that 5 years later they will go back and throw tokens at them and confuse them. And my message to the Kenyan people is, Kenyans, we have been complaining, we have been concerned about the quality of leadership in our country. We have been unhappy with the performance of many of the public sectors. Here is our chance. Here is your chance to elect leaders for yourselves. Let leaders not decide for themselves who goes where. Let you decide which one of us deserves to go to those offices of honor to serve you. There is no other way. This is not about drama. It's about the quality of education of our children. It's about the health of our people. It's about food security. It's about, you know, the dignity of the Kenyan person.
Thank you, Prof. I stop you there. Thank you for that. And we wish you all the best. No doubt we'll be covering you and speaking to you over the next few weeks.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming into studio.